So why don't we go ahead and get started? Don't know if we have a formal agenda, but I've been doing this a while, and I think we'll be able to navigate this because this is probably one of the more difficult of the Jack Hopkins meetings. We've already had a tough one in making some eliminations. And even with those eliminations, I think we all realize we had still more than half perhaps, to cut. And so these tough decisions were not easy. And I thank you all for the time you took on, digesting the answers to the questions that we got from the agencies and then making these determinations. Before we get going on our finalizing of the amounts that are going to be allocated, I did want to ask Doris. And Doris, you may want to introduce Cody again for anybody that joined us late, but Doris wants to talk to us a little bit about the CDBG COVID-19 grant.
Thank you, Susan. I appreciate it. So again, Cody Toothman, and I think Cody is muted as well as his video turned off. But Cody is the new program manager in the Housing and Neighborhood Development Department. His first day was actually this past Monday. He will be the person in the hand department who will oversee and administer the Jack Hopkins grants for the council once they are selected tonight and approved by the full council. So great. Welcome, Cody.
There's Cody, and thank you again, Cody. We're just delighted to have you and anxious to have you on board to assist with the Jack Hopkins administration. Oh, great.
So what I wanted to remind our viewers tonight, particularly service agencies who've applied for and may be tuning in tonight, that the City of Bloomington, through its Community Development Block Grant funding, received COVID-19 money as well. We received a little over $500,000 to aid with COVID-19 activities. We are currently taking applications for that. Those applications by June 1st. They can be submitted to the hand department by 4 p.m. on June 1st. If you want to request an application, you can go up on our city website at bloomington.in.gov/hand and look on CDBG, or you can email us at hand@bloomington.in.gov. Thank you, Susan.
Well, thank you, Doris. And again, for anyone that's watching on CATS, this is really important. This is a nice additional amount of money to be able to assist us with what we're trying to do here with the city's investment in social services. So thank you for that. I see that Beverly Callender Anderson is with us. I don't know, Beverly, if you are tuned into another meeting or if you want to say just a few words before we get started. And can she unmute herself, or do you have to do that, Stephen?
No, thank you, Susan. No, I don't really have anything much to add except to say that this has been a really difficult process. And so I hope that people understand, how much this team has worked to get to this place and even further. But thank you all for everything that you're doing.
Thank you, Beverly. We appreciate your leadership with the Social Services Work Group.
Thank you.
Okay, now let's get on to the main event, unless there's anything from an administrative standpoint that you need to talk about, Stephen.
I guess I'll just put tonight in context. So after tonight, the goal would be to have a list of agencies and amounts that the committee would like to recommend funding. You won't actually make that recommendation tonight. You'll forward those recommendations onto the allocation hearing that's scheduled for May 26th at 6 p.m. That will be another electronic Zoom meeting, but that's where you'll actually announce the final recommendations that you'd like to make. So that's the end point that we'd like to get to tonight. And how we get there is I'll have a spreadsheet that I'd be happy to pull up whenever we're ready for it. And it's got the averaged recommendations that resulted from your individual recommendations that you submitted to our office. And based on that, you all can, maybe Susan was going to explain this, but you all can adjust and make changes as you see fit. And hopefully at the end of it, we'll have a final number for each agency, along with any conditions or partial funding stipulations that go along with that. So that's kind of where we are procedurally.
Thank you, Stephen. And before we get started, there was the There was another amount of money that we actually might have to contribute. Is that correct? Do you have that number right off the top of your head, Stephen? And can you talk a little bit about what that is? It's leftover money from last year's round. Is that correct?
Correct. It's just a little over $8,000, I believe $8,114 that was left over and unused from 2019. If the committee wants to make use of that money, it can request that the administration propose an appropriation ordinance. Between now and Tuesday, I would contact the administration to confirm that they'd be willing to do that. In the past, it's been something they've been willing to do. Unused funding from the Jack Hopkins non-reverting fund does not revert back to the general fund, so it remains in the Jack Hopkins fund for future years. So it should be something that the administration is willing to do, but it would take a request from the committee to start that process.
Got it. So I want us to keep that amount in mind. My recommendation was for this round was for everybody to stay as close to 311,000 as we possibly could. And I think most of us did that. We're a little bit over. If I look at the spreadsheet, I think to what, 314. So we might want to just kind of, try to get it back to 311 if we can tonight, and then just understand that we may have that additional amount if we see places where we absolutely think we should try to raise some of these amounts so that the agencies can maybe have a better shot at doing some of their priority projects. That's going to be the goal, because when we look at the sheet, and I'm going to ask Stephen to put it up in a minute, it looks like we're pretty close in a lot of areas. I mean, obviously, everybody's going to come at this from a different frame. We're going to have different priorities, and we've done different things with our spreadsheets. That said, every time I have done this, it's pretty interesting that I don't always get what I want. I mean, the things that I said, but when you average it in, we're not that far apart in terms of giving some of these agencies a significant amount for them to be able to apply to what they had proposed to us. So that's what we're going to take a look at, is how close are those numbers to being able to give them either as close to their full ask or at least close enough for them to do at least a portion of some of their project work. So let's go ahead and take a look at that spreadsheet, and that's kind of where we will start, just seeing what it looks like. These are going to be kind of small for those of us that might need magnifying glasses to look, but hopefully everybody having an okay time seeing those numbers as to what the agency requested and then what the average from where everybody's cumulative scores put it. So we might just want to take a look at all options and see what they asked for and how much was allocated for their diaper program. And just kind of think about that for a minute. Would you like to, let me ask the committee members how you want to do with it, how you want to deal with this. Shall we just kind of take a brief rundown of everything so we get it more in perspective? Or have you already done that on your own, and are we ready to maybe take each one at a time and say, do we think they need a little bit more, or are we okay with letting the average sit? Sue?
Might be helpful. I think most of us have been through the whole list at least once. It might be helpful to talk through all of them and then individually and then circle back. Because I know in my case at least, some of the decisions I made would be different in a different year. And so if we go through each one, I think we'll all have a chance to share the context in which we each thought of all options for Artisan Alley or Big Brothers Big Sisters or whatever. Sure.
So again, I think we were all taking the cue from Beverly Callender Anderson and her work with the work group on social services, that food, healthcare, shelter, and to a certain degree, childcare were going to be kind of up there in our priorities. But again, we're all going to come at this from a little bit different frame as to, how closely these things align to those emerging COVID-19 priorities. So let's just talk about the all options. Would anyone like to start and just venture? Do you think this is a fair amount, or would you think it should be upped or reduced even further? Anybody want to start? Matt, are you having an opinion?
Yeah. Sure, I'm here. I guess maybe worth noting too that the total amount for the remaining organizations at this stage of allocation priorities was 621,000, and we have about almost exactly half of that to allocate. So just as a sort of anchor, even when you start to think about a project, on average, requests are going to have to be cut in half. So of course that doesn't. Some will have higher priority, food, shelter, and maybe be funded fully. Others are unique in that they have a particular item they would like to buy that requires a certain amount of money. But even so, I think being aware that on average things will fall by about 50% is helpful. And the average here looks like a little more like a little over a third. I'll just say I think it's an important program to try to help if we can. And it is one that I think any amount, it's like the specific dollars don't matter necessarily, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6,000 could all go as far as they're able to go. It's not contingent on a certain threshold.
Thank you for that. And that's kind of a good formula that a lot of us maybe started with is we know we got to cut it by half. So do we cut their ask in half? I applied a little bit different frame in that, and I'll just be upfront. Everybody that had anything to do with food, as that emerged as I think the number one need, I gave them their full ask or as close to their full ask as I could give them. But then I had to take a look at where else I needed to maybe cut even more than just the half. So that was kind of my strategy thinking too. Anybody else want to make a comment about the all options requests? Ron, I see you're unmuted.
I'm happy to go ahead and say I didn't give them anything. And my process when I went through this was I looked at everybody, and the ones that were food and shelter and health specific and solidly on those met those criteria from the Jack Hopkins. I went through our list and I apportioned some of those their full amount, and I worked back through the ones that didn't exactly fit the round peg in the square hole very well. And so I ended up with perceiving the diaper program as it didn't really meet that category of the Jack Hopkins funding. So I didn't give them anything. And not that they're not a deserving and wonderful program, but I realized that we had to cut $320,000, and so that was my philosophy on going through these. Yeah. I figured they might be able to pick their funding up through another source.
Thank you for that. Sue, do you want to go next? Just a general philosophy of how you kind of made your decisions?
Yeah, similar, the food and shelter and healthcare were priority. And in the case of all options in particular, for me, that it was a health issue. For parents with young children, particularly those who are living in poverty, access to diapers, it's a human dignity issue, I think, but it's also a healthcare issue for the health of those children as well. So in a year like the one we're having, I didn't feel comfortable funding their full request at $12,000, but I thought partial might make sense and might attend to the broader health issues that some of our children experience. So,
thank you for that. Tim, you want to venture any comment here before we move on?
Pretty much summed it up.
Okay. Mark, are you there? Can anybody, does Mark need to
Are you muted, Mark?
unmute himself? Maybe he had to step away. Oh, there.
No, I was somehow muted by host. So I am here now. So yeah, honestly, I really agree with Sue from Larry's point there. I actually think that this is a crucial need, and especially for a lot of low-income families. And, I originally wanted to be able to give them the full request, but, looking at all the other needs, of course, I couldn't be able to do all of that. And so, so I recommended about 2/3 of the funding, but, in my, I would prefer to increase that at least somewhat.
Thank you for that. Yeah, I would not mind seeing it go up a little higher, but I don't know that we need to make any decisions yet until we go through the whole list and see where it might be more appropriate to take a little from here, give a little there, or consider this for part of the $8,000 that we may still have left over. Matt.
Do we want to think, as we're kind of going through this list, since we are maybe not, I don't know if we're going to talk through all of them in quite this level of detail, but if so, do we want to, does it make sense as we go through to kind of take a little bit of a temperature in terms of, is there a majority of the committee members who feel that this is good, or maybe up a little bit would be better, or down a little bit would be better? Like,
sure, we can do that.
I don't know. I mean, I would certainly defer to how this has been done in the past if there's an efficient process there.
This is a fluid discussion, and by the time we get through everybody, we will shift some things around. We have the ability to do that in this meeting, and it will be the consensus. It will be the will of this committee, as if we think this is low, we need to raise it a little bit, or it's fine, let's let it sit for now until we go through some of the others and see where we might be able to make the shift. So do I get the sense that from what everybody said, you would agree with it should probably be just a little higher because it is a healthcare?
Yeah, I would say where it is or a little higher is my preference.
Okay. And that would be my opinion. Sue, I get you maybe feel the same way. Mark, feel the same way. Tim?
Yeah, I'd go to 5,000.
And Ron, would it be okay with you if we rounded it up to 5,000, say?
Oh, yeah, of course.
Okay. We can put that there for now and keep moving on, because this will get easier as we go down the list. Now with Amethyst House, it looks like we're not too far off. That was a big ask, and I struggled with it too. This is housing for some of our more vulnerable population, and that's why it was pretty high on my list, to make sure that the Amethyst House has the structure of that home, that people who are housed there currently aren't in any kind of jeopardy from a leaking roof. So I felt it was important. I think I funded a little higher than our average here, just to be able for them to fund one of their projects. I couldn't see my way to funding all of them, but I think it was the number one priority that I thought that $23,000 might be appropriate for them. But that's just my opinion. Matt, anything? I'm just going to go in the order that I see you on these Hollywood squares. So Matt, what's your feeling about Amethyst House?
Could you skip me? Actually, I'm trying to pull up my notes from when I
sure.
did this myself, and I should have more to add in just a minute.
Sure, no problem. Ron, are you next?
I allocated the full amount of their request, and based on that, it's shelter, and they have done a great job over the years in Bloomington, and I know that the funds that they use will be very much important to their organization. And so that's why I allocated them the full amount.
Thank you. Sue, how about you?
This was one of those kind of hair-splitting questions for me. They are shelter, but I tried to look a little deeper at what they were actually seeking funding for. And it occurred to me that there are some things that might be critical. They asked, for example, for new flooring in some of the common areas in the men's shelter. And that's, no pun intended, kind of foundational. I thought that painting or replacing some cabinets might be less critical right now. So I tried to look at an amount of funding that would at least allow them to knock out 1 or 2 or 3 projects, depending on what their priorities are. And so I added up some of the things that I perceived to be more critical and that they listed as more critical. And that's how I came up with partial funding for roughly half the amount.
So just a question, would you think this should go higher or lower?
I might go a little lower. Again, in a different year, I would lean toward funding the whole thing.
Okay,
but
sure.
As we prioritize food and again, if we were putting a roof on this or fixing a foundation, that's one thing. If we were painting, that's another.
Right.
So
Stephen, did you have a point?
Just I guess a request. If the committee is intending to fund a particular part of a proposal, it would be helpful for staff if the committee could identify that. We will include any conditions, terms, or partial funding stipulations in the final funding agreements that go to these agencies. So knowing exactly what the committee is funding is certainly useful for us as we come up with those funding agreements. Very
good. That will be very, detailed, but important so that we can direct the agencies. This is what we would prefer you would use your allocation for. And hopefully we're respecting their priority list too, because we have asked them what's number 1, 2, 3. And I think that's maybe where I came up with mine is it kind of went with their first ask. Tim, anything to add here?
No, I'm comfortable with the amount that we've allocated. I was looking particularly at the men's shelter. Not because I'm biased that direction, it's just that I thought that one was probably more important because it was interior work. And I would point out that these places get a lot of turnover of people, and that's why things literally wear out, just new people coming in, new old people walking out. So it's an important program.
Great, thank you. Mark, any opinions on this?
Well, I mean, it's pretty, the average recommendation is pretty much quite close to what I recommended. So, I'm satisfied with where we are in this one.
Okay, good. Matt, can we get back to you?
Yep. Yeah, and I was able to look at the details there, and I think my thinking was pretty similar to Sue's actually in thinking not just the category of service that we're looking at with the organization, but what are the particular projects? And I guess when I'm thinking about COVID-19 emergency response and food and shelter, I'm trying to about keeping people sheltered and making sure people have food. And obviously the programs here are important and the upgrades are important too, but I didn't feel like all of them necessarily rose to the level of will you not be able to house people if this is deferred a little bit. So certainly would love to fund the full thing, but of course we're all making hard decisions and in allocating these dollars. And so I came in a little lower than the average as well, which I guess means that's my preference, but I'm also okay with where it is.
Okay. Well, given where it is, and given that at least 2 of you have said that maybe it's a little lower, but you have more priorities specified, Sue, do you mind going ahead and kind of outlining for Stephen's sake to maybe put some notes over there on the side? What specifically did you allocate that's lower than the 20,000 we see here, and for what? Do we kind of start that detail work?
Some of the specific things that struck me as being kind of mission critical for a house, replacing the flooring, the tile flooring in the men's house. And I think depending on, and beyond that, I think it would be up to them, but it struck me as depending on their condition, countertops might be essential as well. They talk about replacing countertops. And if we want to keep a sanitary place for food prep, then that seems to make sense to me. But if I remember correctly, I'm checking my notes now, the flooring was a pretty big price tag, and flooring's crazy expensive. So I think that was in there as well.
Okay, and then can either you and Matt kind of pinpoint what that amount would be to allow them to do those portions of their project?
I don't think it was disaggregated. In their priority list, they have a $25,000 amount for all of the common area upgrades in the men's house, which included 3 or 4 different things. So it seems like that's kind of just the combination of all of them. So it wasn't clear to me, I guess, what just replacing the flooring or the countertops would be.
I think that's why I came up with my 23,000. I think that was close enough to capture all the things that they were needing for the upgrades in the men's house. Anybody else have another opinion about should we stick with this 20,000, go higher or go lower? Anybody want to speak up?
I might be inclined to take that a little lower and focus on the flooring, and then what's left over might go toward countertop, and then what's left over might go toward cabinet.
All right, how much lower, Sue?
Where are we now? 34,520. Maybe 15, 18.
18?
How would people feel about that?
17,250 is half. Well, not that that matters. It's arbitrary, I guess.
Why don't we say 18
yeah.
and then revisit it once we get through all of them?
Yeah, absolutely. We can revisit anything. These are not set in stone. So anybody else disagree with this for now as a placeholder? Okay.
I suppose I suppose I should add, I don't think it's absolutely necessary to specify in every certain case, what they're to use the money on. If it's important to the committee, I think we want to specify in the funding agreement what we want to prioritize.
Absolutely right. And I will say that in past years, I personally have been a little uncomfortable when we start to micromanage their projects. Our job is to give them the money. And it's kind of up to them based on how much we give them, what they then choose to prioritize once they have it. As long as it's in the proposal, I don't think it's appropriate for us to say, oh, you don't need that. Oh, we want you to do that. So to a certain degree, I don't like to micromanage that, but it is helpful to us if we're just coming up with the dollar amount as to what they can realistically do with the amount that we are deciding tonight. Does that make sense? Anybody else have anything on Amethyst House before we move on? And by the way, and this goes back to something Ron said, why this is so difficult, why I appreciate all of you is absolutely every single agency here on our list is doing incredibly important things. And so that's why we don't want to send the message at all to anybody that what they're doing is not important or worthy. But we did have a very clear frame with COVID. So let's move on to Amethyst, Artisan Alley. And it looks like everybody was pretty clear on that. It was a good project, but it just didn't meet the mark of the priority spending. So any further discussion on that with the decision not to fund them at all for their after-school project?
Other than that, I think that this is a really lovely idea, and $3,000 can probably go a long way. And I actually really, really, really wanted to fund it, but given this year's priorities, yeah, it just makes sense to.
I think that's where we all were. So I think we can kind of move on from here. If there's any additional funding at the end of the road, we may come back. But Big Brothers, Big Sisters, they wanted a lot. It was a big ask. And I can see from the averages that it didn't quite meet the mark. Any further discussion on that $3,750 that's sitting there? Now, another something that we might want to consider is if that amount really isn't going to help them at all, we may decide if the amounts average out that low to just do we want to fund them at all and have that $7,000 or $3,000 rather go somewhere else. Any opinions on that, Matt?
No, I mean, I guess I'm comfortable leaving it where it is for now, and we'll see.
Okay.
Yeah, things fall.
Ron, any opinion?
My take on it was, I love Big Brothers, Big Sisters, but it was for personnel costs. And I just didn't think it fit the priority of the Jack Hopkins funds at this time.
Thank you. Sue, any opinion?
As I'm looking at their response to our questions, how would you proceed? How would the project proceed if only partial funding is awarded? We will proceed with our plan to hire a development associate. And I'm trying to think about what this amount of money would do, what $3,750 would accomplish in terms of salary. I think if I remember, I have to look at my notes again, but I think if I remember correctly, the price tag on that particular role was something like $45,000 or $50,000, including everything.
Mm-hmm. So this was just a partial for what they actually need to fund the position. So
right, and I don't know what else they are cobbling together elsewhere, but I would question whether or not $3,750 would make sense. You can't hire part of a person, So.
I question that too. Tim, anything else on that?
You know, I'm thinking the same thing. Are we funding at a level where it's meaningful to the agency? And I'm not
Yeah.
sure that we are.
Mark?
Well, I think any organization can find a use for 3750. You know, it just, but in terms of what they're asking for and why they're asking for it, you know, for that particular goal, no, I don't think it's going to be.
Okay. So show of hands or thumbs up or whatever, do we want to zero this out or do we want to keep it where it is?
Yes.
I asked a two-part question and then I said show of hands. Duh. So
Zero it out.
zero it out is what I hear. Anybody else have a different opinion?
I'm okay with that. I kind of expressed a different opinion initially, but I'm okay with that.
Okay. Why don't we, for now, and we can always come back, zero that out because it's not going to get them to where they want to be for what they asked for. And let's move on to Bloomington Cooperative Living. And I see that, again, I'm looking at this as affordable housing, and they have a pretty important need. And so I was willing to give them the full amount. It was a small enough ask that I thought they should get the full 7,000. But apparently I am in the uber minority. Everybody else said no. And so I'm willing to zero that out if nobody else sees any reason to.
Well,
that small amount for what they.
that small amount won't do much for their roof project. That's the problem. So I think you're at a place where I, first of all, question whether the 7,000 was enough to do the project in the first place. It's a pretty big structure.
I know you did, but I seem to remember when we asked them that question, didn't they answer it pretty well?
They gave us an estimate.
They did. My biggest concern in all of this is the fact that, you know, I'm all for affordable housing and think about the authority. But this is a different type of organization, I think, than someone that's like primarily serving the homeless or low-income individuals. This is more like kind of an activist-based, anarchist, collective type of group, and I'm not necessarily sure that that falls fully within the realm of our funding priorities at this time.
Yeah, and yet, you know, we don't want anybody losing their home or being in jeopardy of losing their home.
Of course.
Just because they need a roof repair doesn't mean the people that are living there are not going to be able to have that housing.
Yeah.
So
And I think the organization did specify that the vast majority of residents and members of the co-op are low income by definition. But, and I will also say that with most of these things, and Mark kind of made this point with Big Brothers or Big Sisters, that like when we ask them what they'll do in the alternative, it's usually like, well, we'll keep trying to get funding. So even partial awards, you know, certainly $1,100 wouldn't pay for a roof, but it would help them get there. So I'm a little more okay with partial funding even for discrete items because it's still going to help them get what they need ultimately because they have to raise less money from other sources to get there.
Okay, so you're okay with, even though it is a small amount, to leave it where it is. And I would be okay, since I was the only one that thought they should get funding and I gave them full funding, to remove that and take it back to zero. Anybody else? Either way, anybody else have another opinion? Doris and Jim. Hi, Doris. You have an opinion.
I don't get to leave. But I guess in your mind, and particularly the new committee members, that there's a finite period of time that these funds have to be utilized. So you probably won't take it to the council until June. We probably won't sign funding agreements to the end of June. And then this funding has to be used by the end of the year, with the possibility of it being extended for another 90 days to March. So it may be that some of these, I know you want to fund some and say they have the ability to go out and get money to maybe match it or be able to provide for full funding, but that may not be the case if they have only maybe 6 months, 9 months at the most to be able to utilize the funding.
That's a good point. Yeah, thank you so much, Doris. That's absolutely right. No, we've got to keep that in mind. And, I think as I'm looking at that, again, I'm more than happy to remove my one and only $7,000 and bring that back to zero. And again, we can come back and revisit it. Anybody else have something else you might want to contribute?
This is the one that was in bad shape right now, right? So I thought the project was going to take a long time, and it almost sounded like a commercial project that they might want to go to a commercial bank to ask for the funds. But
and speaking of fundraising, if this in past Jack Hopkins years, we were always saying, well, we'll give them a little bit and they can always go out and find more from other sources. That may not be the case in the time of COVID. Every nonprofit is going to be struggling to get their donors up and giving them. And so I don't know that I feel all that cavalier about, oh, they can get it somewhere else. Not this year. Maybe, not in the near future. So I don't know. Any other?
And just a comment, I didn't mean for you not to find Bloomington Cooperative at all. Just wanted to remind you as you move forward about the limited period of time.
Important maybe to keep in mind, if they answered the question, how would you pursue this project, if you weren't awarded the funding? In this case, they did answer that and said they would use a construction loan. So I think it would be, if we were to fund them with anything, it would help lower the amount of that loan for this nonprofit that is serving mostly a low income population. But
got it.
Things to keep in mind.
I agree with Matt, and I'm through talking.
Chime in anytime, Doris. We love it.
Anytime.
So what do we want to do with this one?
Zero.
Zero?
I say zero.
Zero it out.
Let's do it to zero. And now we move on to the Boys and Girls Club, and their ask was 24,000. Our average is 13. What do we think about that, Matt?
Let's see. So look at my sheet here. That's pretty close to what I recommended. That it seems fine to me.
Ron, any opinion here?
I'm a terrible person, aren't I? I give
no, don't
zero. I'm looking for my comment.
Give some people zero.
Yeah, it was personnel, and I just thought there were other priorities in our $640,000 in requests. So, it's a great organization. I think they're great. So it just didn't, to me, fit right now.
Thank you. Sue?
Wait, okay.
You want me to go?
I recommended funding. I would be fine with the average we have. It occurred to me the Boys and Girls Club is also about things like responding to food insecurity and making sure kids have something to eat. And making sure they have a stable place to be. And those are critical needs this year. And particularly given just the nature of this organization is building relationships over time, and disrupting those relationships might have different consequences than it would for another organization. So I would be content with the level that we've talked about here, or going a little higher.
Okay. Tim?
One of my priorities was children, so that's why I would like to see it as high as we could possibly get it.
Okay.
Boys and Girls Club, with the now 2 clubs in Bloomington, really have a very big program to deal with number of kids. So, and they do good work. So whatever we can do for them, I think we should try to do that. So
great, thanks. Mark?
This is pretty close to what I recommended, so I am satisfied with where we currently are, but I do think that this is a priority, and for the continued operations does go well above and beyond personnel, and can provide crucial services at a really important time. So I'm in favor of funding this.
Okay, Matt?
I expressed it being okay with where it was. That's okay.
You've changed your Hollywood Square. I forgot that I borrowed. So it sounds like there might be some sentiment to up this amount from the 13,000 where it is. Anybody want to throw out an amount that you think is fair? Stephen, did you have a point?
I think Beverly Calendar Anderson had a comment maybe to add on this one.
Please.
Yeah, I just wanted to say on the personnel issue, one of the things Boys and Girls Club is doing, and all of the childcare agencies are doing, are having to, because of social distancing, having to serve fewer kids at a time. And so the personnel becomes really essential when you're only serving 8 kids, and then you have to have personnel to cover all of those. And so I think in other years, personnel may be an issue that you may not want to consider, but this year it's really critical to the program because you're going to need almost double the personnel to serve the same amount of children.
Good
just
point.
because you're social distancing the kids.
Yeah,
Yeah.
good point. And I
Good.
was thinking of that too in some of the places who rely heavily on volunteers, but because many of their volunteers are not willing to get out and about, they're needing to hire staff.
Right.
That also may apply to that too. So thank you for that, Beverly.
You're welcome.
Can I throw in there
Yeah,
too?
Tim.
One of the things they're dealing with is a shortage of volunteers because IU is no longer here for the interim.
Right.
Good point.
So those students who basically volunteer are not in town any longer.
Mhm. We did get an interesting email from President McRobbie today about what may happen in the fall. So we may have more students back than we thought. So
Good.
still a work in progress, I think. All right, so let's throw out an amount here. It sounds like we want to maybe increase it. By how much? What would be a fair amount to throw out there?
Would people be open to 18,000?
18?
It's about 3/4 of what they asked for.
Is that okay for a placeholder?
Yes.
Okay, let's do that. And now we're moving to Catholic Charities with their trauma expansion grant. Looks like we're very, very close to giving them what they want. Everybody okay with it sitting there for now? Any further discussion on that?
Yep.
I see no. Good, we're moving right along. Let's go to Centerstone. And they had a huge ask, which was an issue when we're talking about the proportionality. And it looks like with this, there was not a whole lot of will to want to get close to 44,000. So what do we want to do with the 2,500 that's sitting there? Tim?
I'll speak
Matt.
up actually, if that's okay. I know my Hollywood Square changed. I think it's because I disabled my video for a minute and then came back. But it looked. I think I'm the only one who based on the numbers, who funded this at some level, which is maybe relevant to our thinking, I guess. Is that right? Am I missing something?
No, you're right.
So yeah. Let me see if I want to defend it or defer to the consensus of the rest of the group. I mean, I do think it's an important need, but granted, we're all working with constraints here and trying to balance them. Sorry, I'm trying to like get to I have like 4 different documents open, you know.
I know it's tough.
Probably looking at.
Anyone else have another opinion while Matt's kind of looking up his data about where we're sitting with that very, very small amount? Sue?
Part of what I think this is an interesting idea. This is actually, Kinzer Flats is actually in District 2, so I paid attention to it. What struck me about that was the system that they were asking for. They were, for example, seeking a system that would accommodate up to 45 cameras. And what I wondered is, can we scale that back? Is there any way to start with 20 cameras or something like that? And there didn't seem to be an option of even doing that. And so I kind of struggled with that a little bit. And so I would love to see them kind of rethink this project a little bit, or give it to us in smaller chunks, and to look at that for next year. So.
Okay, Tim, do you have an opinion?
No, I'm fine with what we're allocating. I'm okay with it.
You mean you're okay with just the small amount that's sitting there, or?
Well, either zero it out or accept it for what it is.
Okay, Mark, any other?
Yeah, I mean, my sense is, you know, and I actually understand Matt's point here because it is a really important need, but I tend to be on the side of, if we're getting to those low of numbers, to zero it out, because I'd rather have more money to spend on organizations that really can move forward with a project rather than just kind of doling out little here and there. So.
Ron?
I gave it 0, and I would vote for zeroing it out. And part of my philosophy on this was it had me. I was concerned that they needed that many cameras at their housing.
Right.
That the programming there bothered me.
Okay.
And so that's where I was coming from.
Again, with housing, cameras can be important for security. I'm not kind of,
Yeah.
the need. So Matt, did you find your data?
Yeah, I did. I can speak a little bit to what I was thinking. I do think it's pretty important in talking to some folks in that in the sheltering services, especially for really vulnerable populations that are sometimes taken advantage of by others, and the security becomes an important element to the projects or to the housing development success. But they did break down a little bit their costs, and I was trying to fund a portion of what was needed, which brought me in around 15,000. They had those itemized in our packet that we had from a couple weeks ago. But I agree that it doesn't make sense actually to do just a few thousand. So since I'm was the only one, I would support zeroing it out. At
Okay.
this point.
Thank you. Is that the consensus? We just take this to 0 for now? I'm seeing head nods, yes. So thank you, Matt. We'll take that to 0 for now. Community Kitchen of Monroe County. I would advocate that we give them the full ask. It's food. Anyone else have another opinion?
I'm good with that.
Give them the full ask.
I'm okay.
They ask for so little every year and they do so much. So I'm usually pretty happy to invest in their equipment and the things that they need. Anybody else have anything else to add there?
No, they do good work.
All right, seeing none. Let us go to Courage to Change, Sober Living. I'll go ahead and start. I gave them their full ask because I love these programs. I love this, and I love St. Vincent de Paul that are helping with rent, because I think that's going to be huge with helping people, keep their housing at a time when that's going to be a serious issue in Bloomington. That's just my 2 thoughts. Matt, what about you?
Yeah, this is just a little bit below what I recommended, and I would love to fund it the full amount. So I would support it where it is, or taking it up a little bit. I think the economic and financial stress that programs like this can help right now in the COVID context is really important.
Thank you. Sue?
I appreciated this proposal. Well, I appreciated all of them, but especially, I think we're going to see a lot in the next few months. As the restriction on evictions is being lifted, we're going to see a lot of stress in this area. I would recommend full funding, or at the very least, perhaps we could take that number up a little bit.
Thank you. Ron?
I looked at 2 different programs that were doing rent subsidy in this emergency situation, and I funded the other one for Latinos in the community. Both of them are very deserving, and both of them are very helpful. So it was a matter of me, looking at it, and just one of them got 0 and the other one got all of it. So I'm absolutely fine with them receiving the amount that they asked for, our average recommendation.
Yeah, thank you, Ron, for reminding me. There were 3: St. Vincent de Paul, El Centro, and Sober Change for Sober Living.
Yeah.
Mark, what are you thinking about this one?
Yeah, I recommended at the 3,000 level, and my thinking was that because this is a very same ask that we've had previously, though I do understand the novelty of the current situation, I would be in favor of upping that. I've got no objection.
Great. Tim?
Yeah, I think we've cut sufficiently other projects, so we could go to the full funding.
All right, am I kind of getting the sense that's the consensus, to go up to full for now? We can always come back and cut if we need to by the time we get to the bottom.
Yeah, I'm okay with that.
Okay,
Sounds good.
Take that up to 6,000. El Centro, and this was the other one, proper. I think it's absolutely going to be a critical function to help people with their housing. So I said full ask, I think. Matt, any opinions?
Similarly, I mean, I was close to the full and would love to fund the full level if possible. I think inevitably everything got taken down just a little bit in my funding, or almost everything, but I would support the full, or where it is, either one.
Sue, where are you?
I was at partial funding in my thinking, only because I had also recommended support for Courage to Change and for St. Vincent de Paul, which were the other two that were responding to these kinds of issues. Just mostly because of the number of clients served, it seemed to make sense to take this down a little bit. But I would, again, there's not really a bad decision here if we go full funding.
Bring me the phone.
Ron?
Well, it's, yeah, I wanted to go full funding because from what is in the analysis of what's going to happen with COVID is that there's going to be a lot of people that are going to need rent help and housing support in the next year. So I gave it the full amount and hopefully we'll stay there.
Mark?
Yeah, I recommended the full funds here. I'm a big fan of El Centro, and I think that especially considering some of the populations that are most disproportionately affected by COVID, as well as the industries that a lot of the folks that are working in that they're serving, I think that this is a critical need, and I would support full funding.
Thank you. Tim?
Same, actually, full funding.
Okay. Well, that's my preference. So I'm going to lobby hard to pull it all up
All
to
right.
10,000. But hey, I can be convinced.
Well, we're really close anyway.
Okay, let's do it. And again, we may have to come back and do some shaving, but let's not worry about it just yet. Habitat for Humanity, they ask for quite a bit, and it looks like the average is about 10,000, 9,000. What's that going to buy them? Has anybody done the calculation as to will that be worthy of at least some of their asks, some of their projects? Matt, do you have any opinion about that particular level?
I am trying to look at the same thing I think we all are, which is their application and what exactly that would do. I think, if I recall correctly, there were kind of a variety of smaller items, tree clearing, women build site access from West Guy Street, some lot clearing, that kind of thing, where a partial award would help with sort of some of the preparatory work. So I think a partial award would still be meaningful in this case, and my recommendation was for a partial award.
Was
not too far different from the average.
9,000 close to what you thought?
It was just a little above what I had recommended.
Okay. Sue, what do you think?
I would advocate, I would have been content with full funding for this, and I'll say why in a second. But I would at least like to recommend partial funding. And part of my thinking here, obviously it's housing, and that's a critical need in the community and so forth. But one of the reasons, when I dug into their proposal, one of the reasons they are so short on funding this year is because of their mortgage forbearance. So they typically rely on mortgages from existing homes to fund, and rather than evict people in the middle of the COVID crisis who can't make their mortgage payments, they have some more mortgage forbearance in place, which is what's creating this shortage. So it's one step removed, but I still think they're doing this in the name of avoiding evictions and homelessness. And that's what led me to support at least partial funding for this.
Good point. Ron, you have a take.
I think it's a wonderful program, and I gave it 0. And I gave it 0 because the fourth category in our criteria that was added this year was proportionate, cost-effective funding, and it kind of just takes care of about 4 people at an average of about $7,600 person. And I think it's a wonderful program. I've supported Habitat for Humanity. I've helped build a couple of houses. But at this time, it just didn't seem like the funds should go to so few people. And it's a wonderful program, and I totally support people working with Habitat and funding them, but it just didn't seem like when we had to cut $320,000 that it was cost effective for us to do it. So I gave them 0. That's,
Thank
That
you.
was-
And again, no apologies. I think I gave him 0 too. I think where I came from was it was kind of an all or nothing thing, that they can't begin to build if they don't get this whole thing cleared. And that clearing cost was quite extensive. And it was too hard for me to wrap my head around the all or nothing, that partial really wouldn't help them that much. But Mark, what do you think?
Well, I mean, this is lower than what I recommended. And, I understand the argument about that it serves a very small number of people, but I think that concern needs to be also balanced with how much of an impact it will have on that small number of people. And so, I recommended, I believe, 20,000, which is not the full ask, but I also do think, Matt is right on that they do have a couple of other things, tree removal, excavation, other costs that are associated with that. And I do think that, 9,700 would still go quite a ways to help.
Okay. Tim.
Yeah, I think we're in a position to bring it up to like 33%. So it'd be like 20,000 rather than the 16. That's the way I would go.
Okay. What does everybody think about that? I'm happy to know what you
You
think.
might be looking at the wrong line. 9.7 is where we're at right now based on average.
Sorry, yeah. I'm sorry.
Yeah, it's pretty low. They're not going to be able to do a whole lot with that. So
So I was
I
looking at 10,000, rounding up to about 10,000.
I don't think we have to worry about the issue that Doris brought up, though, about not being able to fund a project, because there were 5 discrete things listed in their application that
Right.
this will still certainly help them move this along.
okay,
A partial
so
funding.
I'm hearing some will to round it up to $10,000, but I'm also hearing at least 2 members that maybe might advocate for even more than that. Would we want to go so far as to 15?
Would the group consider 15?
I'd support it.
As a placeholder, that's fine for me.
Okay, I'm seeing majority. What do you think, Mark?
Yeah, I think 15 is good, and that's specifically what they requested for the site excavation.
Okay.
So I'm good with that.
So again, I'm always wanting to make sure they get something that they actually can move on and spend down the dollars by the time they need to. All right, very good. Let us move on to the next one on the list, which is HealthNet. And this is our wonderful organization that used to be formerly known as Volunteers in Medicine. And I was pretty happy with giving them pretty much what they wanted. Sue, you have an opinion on that?
I would agree on this. I think much like mental health, dental health, and oral health is part of healthcare. And we tend to forget that, and we tend to think in terms of vaccines or a broken arm or something like that, but this is part of healthcare, and healthcare for some of the most vulnerable people in this city. So
Okay. Thank you. Matt, what do you think about?
Yeah, I agree completely, and hadn't quite fully funded them, but I was close to this amount and would support keeping it here or putting it to the full as a placeholder, either one. I think it's very important.
Thank you. Ron?
Yeah, I think I'm agreeing with Sue. It's definitely part of healthcare. It's one of the things that we overlook as far as being a contributor to good health and to self-esteem. As we all know, people with broken and chipped teeth, it's better if they're fixed, they look better, they feel better. They also, it can interfere with their nutrition. So I said give them the full amount because it's a really important program.
Okay. Mark?
Yeah, I mean, I think I'm an outlier in giving them a little bit less than other people recommended. However, I could not agree more with the statements made by everyone else, and I'm good with increasing that.
Tim?
Yeah, I'd go for full funding. It's very clear that is a medical necessity. So I'd go full.
Okay, it sounds like quite a few of you want to go full, or I don't know if you want to just keep it kind of where it is, maybe round it up to 17, but I'm happy to go full.
Yeah.
That sound like we're okay with that. Now we're starting to maybe bust our budget a little bit, which may mean that we'll have to make some harder choices later, but okay. Let's get them up there. And next on the list is Hoosier Hills Food Bank. And because this was my number one with the bullet all across the board, I gave them full amount.
Me too.
Ron says me too. Tim?
Yeah.
Me too. Yes.
Sue says full amount. Matt?
Same.
Give them full.
They're the mother load.
Yeah.
They're
They
the ones
are.
providing the food for everybody else. So
Yeah. Give them full.
they need the number one with the bullet. Okay, let's move on from there. Life Designs, services for their clients with developmental delays. They asked for 16, they're getting about half. Are we okay with that amount right there? Does that get them to where they need to go? Has anybody done the calculations there as to what 8,800 will do for them?
I seem to recall that any amount would they'd be able to use it as much as they could for the service. So it's not crucial that it meets a certain threshold. And I funded it at just a little bit below this and would have liked to do more, of course, but yeah.
Sue?
Is there, perhaps we could inch this up maybe to 10,000? It's only $1,200 more, and just leave that as a placeholder. Because I agree, the full amount, I can understand why we can't do that. But just the staff, the intense staffing changes they've had to undergo, I think are pretty critical.
Mm-hmm. Ron, what do you think?
I funded at about half, and it was only out of necessity to make the numbers work. So if people want to round it off to 10,000, that's perfectly great. I mean, if we had enough money, I would have just funded them fully. So,
Mark?
Yeah, as the sole person who did not recommend funding this, I'm okay rounding it up. I think it's good. I think they're a great
Tim?
organization.
I'm okay
Thanks.
with that. Yeah, that's
All
fine.
right, placeholder, you want to go to, Sue says 12, you want to go to 10?
10 is great.
I'm better with 10, I think. Keep us a little closer to our initial budget, although we have made some cuts.
Just to follow up, sorry.
Yeah.
Just I was looking at their answer to the question, and they did say, yeah, we would provide staff supports to as many clients as possible with whatever amount of funds is awarded, just to
Got it.
confirm that.
And we could just make a little note that if we have some additional money at the end of this process, we might want to come back up and pop it up a little bit more. Made Up Mind is easy because they withdrew, so we can move on from there to Meals on Wheels. And of course, I think they need the entire amount. It's food. Oh, am I skipping ahead?
No.
Meals on Wheels, yeah. They have some equipment needs for $7,260, and I was happy to give them the full amount. Anybody else have another opinion? I'm seeing no. Tim?
Full funding.
full funding.
Okay, let's bring that up a bit and move on to Middle Way House. They were asking for 6,000 and they got half. What are they going to be able to do with half? That's the question. So anybody do any quick calculations there and see if that's going to be a decent amount for them to move forward with something substantial? Ron?
Hard to tell, isn't it? If it, combined with other funds, they'll probably be able to redo the electrical and the temperature controls. What, you know, if we had enough, I'd give them the 6. But my recommendation, I think, was give it all to them. But I totally understand that what we're doing is we're trying to work through this to be fair to everybody. So I'm okay with the average. I would like to see it more. I don't know if you get the electrical work and the control panel, if we're going to fund it totally, 3 probably is not going to do it.
Yeah, this one's a tough one because we've got folks either kind of going full or none at all, and they specified parts of labor, but obviously those are tied together. Where I think we have the potential to run into the issue where something short of a full award might not be able to be used if they can't come up with the money elsewhere.
Any other feedback on this one? Sue, you look like you're looking for data.
No, yeah, I struggled with this one actually, and thought it's not, this particular tool that they proposed doesn't impact habitability. They can use the facility and have people live there and reside there without it. So maybe it's worth partial funding and then inviting them to identify a way to make up the difference, or to work with whoever the vendors are to see if, as a nonprofit, they could receive some kind of discount.
Any other thoughts? Thanks. Shall, just as a placeholder, we just let it sit at the 3,000 for now and maybe have this one that we can come back and revisit? Anybody?
Yeah.
Just a final note, they did mention on fiscal leveraging in that section. They said if only partial funding is awarded, they would hope to raise the additional funds to complete the project before November 2020 in order to have a greater control of the climate control system before winter. So hopefully they could do it. I think they have admitted that that's a risk in the application.
Right. All right. Well, let's keep it where it is for now and then move on to Monroe County Casa. Looks like they're getting about a third of what they're asking for. Is that going to be a significant amount for them to accomplish their goals or some of their goals? Tim, you have an opinion on?
Well, I read their priority was on the security system because they've moved their offices down to the ground level, street level. So that's about where I funded it to take care of that issue.
Mm-hmm.
The other program's interesting, but I think security is probably what we really should be funding right now.
Okay. Mark, do you have any opinion?
No, I recommended a little bit more, but I'm happy with where this is.
Where it sits. Ron?
It was another one of those programs, in local programs in Bloomington that I thought have done a great job over the years and are doing really important work with kids in our community. And they struggle always with funding. And so I gave them the full amount. The educational materials, I looked it up. They looked really interesting. And the move downstairs and the security, yeah. So I mean, I'm fine with it being where it is, but they are an agency that always seems to struggle with their funding and the amount of people that are involved with that agency. So,
thanks. Sue?
I am a huge fan of Casa, and I recommended partial funding, and I think I came up with about $1,600 based on two things. First, I have to look at their proposal. They asked for about $1,500 for the actual security cameras. They said that was their top priority, so I thought that was important. They asked for 2 reference works, professional development works for their staff that were only $150. I always think it's a good idea to invest in staff, particularly for an organization like Casa. So those were the 2 things. The $7,700 that they asked for the Red River Readers Program was more of a stretch. So I figured if we had to fund something, let's fund their top priority and of the security system and a little bit extra to at least get the professional development resources in there, because that was such a tiny ask. But that's kind of my thinking. So I think I would recommend like around $1,600. If we go more than that, great.
Okay, Matt?
Yeah, similar to Sue and Tim, I thought they made a compelling case for the security system based on their change in location. And that's, I funded it at exactly that level, though I agree with Sue that for the minimal extra ask on some professional development items, 1620 or 1625 would be a great minimum threshold. And of course, our average is at above that. So I would be happy with that or anything above.
Okay. Again, Casa is a phenomenal program, and I think what they were attempting to teach with that, program, empathy skills, is that right? Which is pretty critical. I mean, this is an area that I'm very familiar with. It kind of broke my heart with where I was with them because I just had to make some cuts.
Right.
I'm more than happy to do partial. If anyone wants to throw out a figure that again looks more fair to them, I would be happy to consider that. Yeah, Matt.
Honestly, this might be one of those ones where if we don't do full 1620 is what makes the most sense because the other part of the request was for the Red Rover Readers Program and training of materials. I guess it's hard to know. I'm not sure we asked the specific question if a partial award for the reading materials would help them. But these are kind of some discrete projects, and I'm not sure somewhere in kind of in the middle makes sense.
Now I'm confused because right now the average is sitting there at 3,122, and their full ask was 9,000. So again, where are we in terms of what we think is fair?
Right. So the security and professional development takes you to 1620. The rest of the request, 7,000 some, was for the Red Rover reading materials, which they wanted to be able to have the children who use those keep them. I guess I don't think it was answered what would happen if there was a sorry, if someone else has it pulled up as well and could answer quickly.
Becky's got a finger up, and
Red Rover.
I've got a concern too. Yeah, Becky.
According to their answer to the question about partial funding, it actually says without full funding for this program, we would not be able to proceed until funds are secured elsewhere. So I just want to let you know that they've already addressed that, and it seems like they can't use partial funding.
Okay.
So you're talking, just to clarify,
ahead,
you're talking about partial funding for the Red Rover Readers.
For the Red Rover program, right.
Okay.
Specifically.
So in that regard, maybe we should take this amount down to the 1625.
Exactly. Yeah, that's what I was kind of trying to pull apart. Is it's either all or 1620 and some amount of cents.
I'm good with that.
1620 and 36 cents would be the exact amount for the two non-Red Rover requests.
And I know we were talking about what that would specifically cover. Could you restate that?
The security system, as well as sorry,
The resource
professional development books.
Resource materials. Yeah.
Perfect. Thank you.
Yeah, thank you, Becky, as well.
So we're taking that down from the actual average aggregation, right?
Correct.
Yes, we are.
Everybody okay there for now? And again, we can always come back and.
Yep.
Moving on, let us go to Macomb upgrades for the kindergarten readiness. 24,000, and we've averaged it around 11,000. What are we thinking, Tim?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I'd like to hear somebody else talk about it.
Okay, anybody else has got their notes up, Ron?
It was a upgrade of the computers for the kindergarten, and it seems like Jack Hopkins had funded them somewhat similarly a few years ago, and it didn't meet my test of food, shelter, or health. And so in that respect, I allocated it 0 because it didn't seem to fit with the Jack Hopkins funding priorities.
Now, I do want to interject here that childcare is in there. When we listen to Beverly and her work group, childcare is one of the COVID needs too. Maybe it's not the top 3 in terms of emergency things, but mine came up a little higher than this average. But again, I'm more than happy to hear what other people think. So
I didn't see that this would stop them from providing the childcare. It just was an upgrade that they seek, and that's fine. But
Stephen, I saw you just went down to the bottom real quick. Can you do that again so we can see where we are from a standpoint?
Yeah. Can I also add that, I think there's specific requests based on the fact that they have these computers that were purchased in the early 2000s, right?
Yeah, a long time ago.
15, 20 years ago. And you want to consider the technological divide between, low income children, especially coming out of the era of COVID. I recommended higher funding, and, I would love to see it higher, but I'm also good.
Okay.
So just for everybody's information, this red number here at the top is what you've got.
Okay.
Now this is based on the $311,000.
Mm-hmm.
So there's about $8,000 more than that you could ask for.
And we have that many more to go.
this number here at the bottom is the running total of what you've put in as a placeholder. So these should, in theory, add up to that 311,000, and you've got it looks like 10 or 11, 10 maybe more to go.
Okay, thank you. While we're at Macam, anybody else have any other thoughts about that?
As I was thinking about this particular proposal, again, I agree on the issue of childcare. For many children, this is a source of nutrition. It's a source of education. I can't even imagine what you could accomplish with a computer from the early 2000s anymore. The only things I peeled out were the like painting that they referenced, because that seemed like a less critical cosmetic pursuit rather than something that was very mission critical. So I would like to see the recommendation go up. I actually recommended 22 too. So I would invite us to consider increasing that, maybe just a little.
Okay, thanks. Matt, what do you think?
Yeah, I was closer to Sue on this as well, not quite at her level of funding, but I felt like it was a very reasonable upgrade that's needed for early childhood development based on how old their computers are. And in answering how they would pursue partial funding, they said they would pursue it in the order requested in their application, which has 6 items. The computer and software is at number 1, that's $3,800. And then the next jump, the second item, curriculum kits, is $12,330. So those 2 items alone takes you to a little over 16,000, 16,130. And then the iSprout assessments takes you to almost 17,000. I think that's where my head was. And they said so funding it about at that level, 17 or 18,000. And they said that they would pursue basically other funding sources for, for any of the items on the list that they couldn't get to. So I think I actually enumerated very specifically to like the first 3 items on the list.
With those calculations, you want to throw it up to 16,000 for now for a placeholder? Anybody want to make that higher?
Yeah, that's about 2/3 of their ask too. I think that's good.
Sue, what do you think? What do you think of that?
That would be great.
Okay. And Matt, you think that covers it?
Yeah,
they're
pretty much. Yeah.
Okay.
Could you list those items? I'm sorry, I don't have everything pulled up on my screen at once. So
it is number 1, computers and software. Number 2, curriculum kits. And number 3, iSprout assessments.
iSprout?
iSprout, like iMac or something else.
Okay, thank you. Okay, Mother Hubbard's Cupboard, Bull Ask. Looks like we're all in consensus.
Food.
New Hope, and they had asked, this is a therapeutic play for at-risk families. They were asking for 20, and the average only came down to about 5,000. So what's that going to do for them? Anybody take a quick look and have any opinions? I think by my calculations, I thought that with $10,000, they could do something. But obviously other people maybe didn't rank it as highly as I did. Sue?
Yeah, I wouldn't be averse to 10,000. My only thinking is that specifically what they were asking for the money for was a pilot project. around family stability and not necessarily shelter directly. And so that made me hesitate just a bit. But again,
Oh, I'm sorry to interrupt you. I am sorry. I'm looking at the wrong line. I skipped a line. New Hope for Families. This is their single.
Yeah.
I must go back to that. They asked for 25,000. Our average is 14. I was jumping down to the joint project there. So
Yeah, this is the Family Stability Program.
right. So go ahead, Sue. I'm sorry to interrupt.
So yeah, I greatly admire New Hope and the work they do and the niche they fill in housing, emergency housing. The only thing that gave me pause here is this is a pilot project. It's a pilot project and it doesn't focus directly on shelter, an actual roof or food. Will it make New Hope better and will it enrich their offerings? Absolutely. But if I had to make a choice between this item, which is indirectly related to housing, and something more directly related to housing, I would probably choose the latter. Does that make sense? I'm sorry.
Yes. Yeah, it does. Thank you. Ron, you have a similar take?
No, I agree with Sue's assessment that it doesn't meet the criteria. And I guess I just got excited because I love mentoring programs for people to address poverty and the behaviors that associate it. So I would be okay with it being, being down, the average recommendation being less. I just think it's a great, New Hope's great. So
Okay.
I just didn't do really well with following the priorities on that one.
That's okay. Mark, you have
Yeah, no, I mean, this is, I recommended funding this at a higher level. And, the reason is because I think that these types of programs that really kind of invest in building kind of the social dimension with people in poverty, to be able to have really innovative projects that pair children with teachers and families, and I think is really critical at early stages of life, and something that can really have long-term consequences in terms of a person's ability to be able to get out of poverty. And so I recommend it at a higher level. I'm not necessarily sure how much, since this is a pilot project, what partial funding is going to accomplish for them. I don't have that one done.
Okay. Thank you. Tim.
Yeah, I think this is an important program, and New Hope has been doing this in the past, so it's just a natural extension of what they're preaching basically. So I would say we should fund it as high as we possibly can.
Okay. Matt. Oh, I'm sorry, Sue.
One of their line items, their first priority line item was 13,000, just to provide that context.
Mm-hmm. I was going to say much of the same. My recommendation came in just below the average, and we have a $13,000 line item for expanding the family service coordinators' hours to support interns and other volunteers. There is another line item at $2,000, the third priority, that expands chef and nutritional coordinators' hours. And they mentioned in their application or in their answer to questions the almost doubling of needs since the public health crisis hit. Right. So supporting something like that, I think similar to our average, either maybe 13 or 15,000 would be a good compromise level.
Okay, so 13, 15, going once, what's the number?
20.
Oh, okay.
No, I'm just throwing something out there. It's like bingo.
If we were trying to match line items, there is one other $1,700 for cookbooks, planning documents. That does skip the second priority item on their list. So if we went to 16,700, that would be 3 out of the 4 items. And they mentioned trying to solicit donors to fill in any gaps.
Okay. Everybody okay with the 16,700?
Yep. Good call. Good
All right. Let's put that in there. Now we go to their joint New Hope with Catholic Charities. This is another at-risk therapeutic play program. And this is the one where they're asked you know, what we average does not probably net them a whole lot, right? Anyone have thoughts about what we do with that 5,295?
I actually recommended much higher for this one, but I'm actually okay if we're at 5,000 as an average. I would say that maybe this might be one of those occasions where we zero it out, given the fact that we still have other important funding priorities ahead.
Yeah, good point.
I hear a yes. Anyone else have a differing point of view?
I funded not as quite as high as Mark, I think, but also higher than the average here. Looking at the line items, sorry, I'm kind of working on the fly here. There are a number of items that where partial funding would be meaningful, I think, for the program, but I need to look a little more still.
Okay. For now, again, we're getting close to the bottom here. Do you want to go ahead and zero this out as a placeholder and then come back to it if we have additional dollars to look at? Or are we,
I'm okay with that.
Place for now.
Well,
are we,
at some
go
point,
ahead,
you're
Tim.
gonna have to cut. We're over our amount, so at some point you're going to have to cut. So it makes sense to maybe zero this one out.
This program was denied last year for the same request.
Okay.
Not that matters.
Yeah, we're funding both agencies, just not this project.
Right.
Right.
Okay, shall we move on to New Leaf, New Life? And again, they're doing transitional services. Anyone have any opinion about that? Looks like we're somewhat close to giving them what, about a little over half? Sue.
And there is a virus scan starting now. Hang on. Okay. I thought this was an interesting proposal. I thought it was also one that lent itself to partial funding. In particular, they talked, I think what they do has implications for homelessness and housing and food insecurities. But I wondered if we could provide support for one of the proposed two staff in mentorship roles.
Okay.
And that's 4,500 is what I came to. But
So that's a starting point. Mark, do you have another on New Leaf, New Life?
No, I mean, I recommended full amount, but I'm willing.
Okay. Matt, you have idea here?
Yeah, I also had recommended the full amount in this case. And I think Sue's right that there's a couple of expansion of hours for existing staff members. The second priority is the $4,500 one. The first priority is the $9,000 one. So one of those two numbers probably makes the most sense as a compromise.
I think I went with the 9,000 with that in mind. I think, you know, that was one thing that I thought might be the most worthwhile to fund. Tim, you have an opinion?
Well, I think, what number did you throw out, Susan?
9,000.
Yeah, that seems more reasonable. I mean, it's a good service that they provide. So the more we can do, the better it'll be for them. So
I would appreciate 9,000 as a placeholder, and if we need to come down to the lower level of support for
That sounds
That
right.
everybody okay to move on from there?
Yeah.
All right.
Could Matt repeat what that was, that $9,000 for? Sorry.
It's okay. Expansion of hours for two existing part-time New Leaf, New Life employees to continue the reentry mentorship program. It's the number one itemized list in their application, in the itemized list. Did you get that all? Sorry, it was kind of long.
Yeah, I'll just put number one.
Okay.
Thank you. And now we go to Pantry 279. This is in food, you know, which was big with me. And I know some of our concerns was, are they serving mostly Bloomington? I thought their answers to the question really helped me out a lot. And obviously this is a huge ask I was not about to give them, the whole amount. But what I thought was I would give them the one thing on their list that was number one, and that was the truck. So I went with 20,000, which is somewhat close to what our average is. So that's what I did with that. Anybody else have another opinion here?
That was my thought exactly, and I recommended the same amount.
Okay. Anyone else?
That's a great idea.
I was thinking fund the executive director position. That's what it seems like they need.
And that was 30, right?
Yeah. And I wouldn't fund at that level, but the fact that they started off the way they did with it as a Girl Scout project, and now it's grown and they're being slammed, let's face it, with
Oh my.
going on right now.
No, I was really impressed once I read the answers to their questions. And then I think, as luck would have it, the day we got their answers weren't they featured in the HT? Wasn't it this?
Right.
Yeah. And maybe that helped further.
They call the
help
HT.
them.
Yeah.
I want to help them, whether to the tune of 20,000 or 30,000, but I kind of went with the lower number just because we had so many other things too that we had to fund. Sue, did you have another opinion here?
Yeah, the only reason I hesitated on this is just because I had directed full funding to Hoosier Hills and just Bloomington-based organizations. And Pantry 279, even though I think they said 75% of their people, their patrons come from Bloomington. I like the idea. 30 seems like a lot to me. 20 I could get my head around, and if they wanted to put that toward an executive director rather than a truck, they could do it.
Sure.
So that 20 feels better to me than 30.
Yeah, that would absolutely be their call. But I just thought for some reason they prioritized the truck. Maybe
Yeah,
that's the first thing. So, but I wouldn't want to direct them to, if they would rather apply it to the salary and not the truck, that's fine with me. But I wanted to give them something that's going to give them at least what they're asking for. So that's why I would recommend rounding it up to 20.
They're a good group of people.
They're like the little engine that could. I'm
They are.
glad they're doing what they're doing. So are we okay with 20,000 as a placeholder?
I'm comfortable with that. I must admit, though, I am somewhat concerned a vehicle for $20,000 is questionable.
Yeah.
Unless they got somebody who's going to help them out.
Well, again, and we don't have to put anything in the notes. They can just take that $20,000 and use it, to their best.
Right.
Yeah. Everybody okay? Can we move on?
I did have, where did you want the
sure.
money spent? It's Dan. I think
Well, I just said we could kind of leave that open and they can decide. The amount that we've decided on would buy them the truck, at least according to their estimates. But I don't know that we necessarily need to put strings on that. They could use it for their executive director salary if they preferred. Is that the consensus? What I'm getting from the group nodding heads? Yeah.
Yeah.
Thank you.
Thanks, Dan.
Thank you.
Hey, are we ready to go on, or is there other thoughts here? Okay. Planned Parenthood. And again, I was happy giving them their full ask. Looks like they're close with 9,000. Thoughts?
Go ahead and recommend doing the full, and I'm saying that as the person who didn't recommend funding them, not for any particular disagreement that I would have with that funding, just as a matter of all over priorities. I had to cut somewhere.
Okay.
So
thanks, Mark. Anybody else?
Important project, important help for women's health in Bloomington. So
right,
full amount.
Okay, good. And Planned Parenthood has not been in the mix for a while. Past 2 years, they've not submitted grants. So I'm fine with full. Are we good with that?
Yep.
Okay. Shalom. They asked for 32. We've got them average at 21. What does that help them do? And do we need to reconsider that?
Well, just as a status update, we're down to our last 4 placeholders. With the $311,000 figure, you've got about $56,000 left between these 4 agencies.
Thank you. We knew
helpful.
we were going to have to go back up and do some adjusting. So
The average for Shalom where it is right now, 20, which is
21.
almost 22. That
yeah.
takes them very close to funding the first two priorities: exterior painting, which was a little shy of 7,
Mhm.
and floor upgrade, which was just over 16,000. So that's basically 23,000 total is those two top priorities, and that's pretty close.
Okay. Any other thoughts on that? Do we want to kind of stay with that average for now, or would the thought be bump it up or take it down a notch or two?
Stephen, how much money do we have left? The 56,000?
6,000.
That's if you don't ask for the leftover money from last year. So with that, you've got about 64,000 if you were to ask to use that.
We have a little cushion.
We're not going to be far off based on these last averages.
We've done extremely well.
And I would suggest, I mean, this is my first go through, but I would suggest putting a placeholder in that you're all comfortable with, and then going back to review it after you see where the numbers shake out. So
Exactly.
If a number makes sense given their priorities and the cutoff, you know, that's just my 2 cents.
Have you had a break?
Sue.
Hi, Sue.
Uh-oh. Hi. I forget I can be seen.
We love you, Sue. Glad
Hi,
you made
Sue.
your appearance.
I can report on the neighborhood if you want me to. Is that
Care. All right. Yeah, we are getting close. We were on Shalom. Do we need to have any more discussion on that?
Matt, you made a comment that a certain figure will get us pretty close to funding your first two priorities. Was
I
that
think-
21.7?
It'd be just shy of 23, I think, or maybe just over 23, actually, $23,035, if I'm doing the math right in my head.
Okay. You want to put that in as a placeholder?
Yeah, let's start there and maybe tweak it later.
Okay. South Central. Now, this one, they were pretty clear. Oh, I'm sorry.
Sorry, Matt.
Exterior painting and floor upgrade.
Yeah, I was particularly fond of the floor because that is a help. That, you know, keeping that place clean. I know from their past asks, that's been something they've wanted for a long time. So that's pretty important. South Central, and weren't they the ones that said that they really do need the full amount?
They did.
Yeah, and that's what I think I did for them. What do you think? I mean, this is a navigation program. These are the clients that are going to be coming to them probably in bigger numbers.
Given the full amount.
I'm hearing a second to my motion.
Yeah, I think all of us recommended the full amount except for Sue. So I don't know if you had any.
Yeah, the only thing, again, in a different year, the only reason I hesitated here is because it focused more on navigation than on providing direct service, directly providing healthcare. And for the same reason, when Made Up Minds, I think, was in here, it was a navigation service, not a service provider. And so I just shied away from that. I don't have any objection to providing some funding for SCAP at all.
And I appreciate that point of view, but that navigation service is actually more important than I think. Sometimes low-income people, they just don't know where to go, and a lot of times those referral services are pretty critical to get them to what they need. So
I would be fine with full funding on that.
And the fact that they just don't have other places to go for that, and if they don't get the full amount, then it's kind of a wash. That was my thinking. So if you're okay with that, I don't want to push the issue. Yeah.
They do a lot in preventing homelessness as well. Yeah.
That's fine. That's fine.
Okay. If you're in agreement, Sue, we'll pop that one up. And once again, we're down to St. Vincent de Paul, and this was the rent assistance, and I was extremely excited about that. Our average is close to what their full ask was, but of course, we can debate that.
This is one where one of the few where I really like the idea of full funding, you know, because again,
Yeah,
we get slammed with this issue in the next.
I did too. I thought full funding was fair, and just to the tune of $2,000 difference here. We might want to, again, we're going to have to go back and do some tweaking. So what do you think, everybody? Want to pop them up to full?
Yes.
Hearing yes.
With that,
Thank you.
Okay, for now. And
Yeah.
that brings us to our last item, which is Wheeler Mission. And there was some discussion, I think, initially about, you know, their the living wage ordinance. This again is for salaries because they're having difficulty finding their volunteer crew and needing to pay people to come on board and do this. But I think we wanted to kind of keep it under $25,000. But we've got it average at 20. What are we thinking? We're already over, right?
How much are we over? 6,000?
We busted the budget.
Yeah, 6,700 or over.
And it's 8,000 or so we tentatively have available if the administration agrees on bringing an appropriation ordinance. Is that right?
Yep.
There we go.
And that's assuming that you only ask the administration to bring an appropriation ordinance for what was unspent from last year.
Right. We
There's,
have an extra step to take before we actually have it to spend.
Yeah, so this evening we're stopping at the 311, right?
We
here's
that would
what,
have been the nice goal,
Okay.
but knowing that we do have that additional cushion, it may be tempting to, you know.
Yeah, it'd be nice to cut less.
But what do we think about Wheeler and where we're sitting with that average? I mean, that's
Pretty close to what I recommended, so I'm fine with that.
Average is great.
I might make it a little more round number, like 20 or something, just to help
20.
us less complicated.
Let's throw in 20, and now we got to do some subtracting.
I do. Let me add one thing. In the program, it said that they had applied for this grant and then they had received subsequently a United Way grant, which was received after the Jack Hopkins grant submission. So I don't think it disclosed how much that was, but they did have part of their needs fulfilled through the United Way grant.
Let me try and look it up.
Okay, thanks, Sue.
Yeah, it's in maybe the notes that they responded. I'm looking up the other one. That would assuage our guilt a little bit, right?
There's no guilt in Jack
No.
Hopkins, Ron.
Oh, it's all
All
good.
good.
Speaking to the living wage ordinance, I think,
Wheeler, oh, sorry.
sorry, is it okay if I'll just continue on that note? In their answers to our questions, they recognized that they didn't meet the living wage ordinance of $13.21 an hour for awards of over $25,000. Their proposed adjustment for that was that we consider supporting actually something different, which is the labor costs of 3 case managers and 2 food service managers for 2 months, and those jobs are at $14.50 an hour. But of course, an award of less than $25,000 would not trigger the living wage ordinance. Not that we don't desire, of course, for everybody to pay living wages for all positions, but just as a technical matter,
Right.
it's worth noting that as well, and what they answered.
Sue, what did you find?
Wheeler, during phase 2 of the United Way grants, Wheeler Mission received $15,000.
Okay.
sorry, you said 15?
15, 1-5.
Yes, thank you.
So what's a good number to throw out in support of what they're doing?
We could subtract that from the 32.6, and then they would be receiving all the funds that they have requested.
At 20,000?
No, it would end up being 17,688 approximately, with the $15,000 from the United Way equals the 32,688.
Okay, so what's that number again, Ron, to throw in? 17?
17,688.
Want to round that up to, or round it down?
What about 17?
17,000?
Sure, 17.
Because we're still over by 24,000, 23,000 now.
Yeah. Okay, now we start the painful process of going back up through the list and eliminating 23,729.69 cents. That is if we want to hit the target of 311 tonight.
Can I ask, in past experience, has it been something of a formality for the administration to agree to bring an appropriation ordinance to reallocate unspent Jack Hopkins funds, or is this something we should really get a firm answer on?
Oh no, this is pro forma. The administration is extremely respectful of this committee, and we went through it several years ago. Tim, I don't know how long ago it was that we had this reverting fund, that it wouldn't go back to the general, it would go back into the Hopkins pot. And, you know, the administration is just very proud of the fact that we have these dollars to allocate, and they're okay with us, you know, hanging on to them. So, yeah, Stephen.
I'll also point out that this year, as Doris mentioned at the beginning of the meeting, there's the additional CDBG process that's about to move forward. So I don't know if now might be a good time to see if Doris has any input on where things stand.
Yeah, I agree, Doris, because who from this list might be likely to apply and be qualified for that because now we got to look at some cutting from what we've decided.
Well, you know, it's really hard to determine what agency are going to apply into our application process ends next week. But I do know that one of the things that we pointed out in our application is that, you know, we're taking the priorities that came from Ms. Beverly Callender Anderson's group, which dealt with food insecurities, daycare, as well as housing assistance. So I'm just assuming that agencies who provide those type of services will be applying for the block grant program funding as well.
And we would encourage them. You know, that's something that we can certainly announce at our next meeting when we announce our final determinations. All right, thanks, Doris.
You're welcome.
Do you want to help us be any more specific about what we have to do next, which is take a look at reducing some of our placeholder numbers? She's checked out. She said, no, that's your job. That's why we get the big bucks.
I would like to propose that I think we'll save ourselves. Oh, I'm sorry. Go ahead, Doris. Sorry.
No, I was just saying to Susan if she can provide me a little bit more direction or how she think I could assist you.
Okay.
Go ahead, Matt.
I guess two things. Maybe to your point, Doris, if there are particular projects that you feel like are well suited to CDBG, I guess it's really hard to know if folks are applying or not. So it's just hard to say. But my actual comment was going to be to propose that we proceed with considering the additional money, the additional 8,000 or so, because I think we might save ourselves a bit of a headache if we feel like that's a given that we're going to be able to allocate that money as well in paring these things down. So that's my preference. If
I'm okay with that. Stephen, can we add to the final total that as if we have it so that we have less than 23,000 that we've got to cut?
Yes. Give me just a second.
If anyone knows of a reason not to do that, please speak up. But
oh, no, it's. And especially this year, I say let's allocate as much as we possibly can.
And I would say maybe leave just a little cushion. That amount, I believe, is the exact amount, but the controller, I think, will still need to verify that and make sure that that's what is left in the fund. So
do you want to just round it down?
Yeah, within $100 or so would probably be fine.
Okay.
Give me a second. Okay.
And Stephen,
Sue, go ahead.
Could you shrink the spreadsheet that you're projecting a little so we could see a few more lines?
That's good.
Not that that makes this easier, but.
Yeah, no, thank you. Okay. Now, we go back to the top of the list. We've got about 16,000 we need to shave off. And so we need to strategize here as to where we think we can take that and still not harm, you know, the intent of the funding.
I see places I'd like to add, but.
Oh no, Sue, you're going in the wrong direction.
I know.
Oh, I know. Wow.
I have one comment if we need to cut.
Okay.
Is that let's see. Now I forgot the agency up on top.
Okay.
Isn't that terrible?
One of my strategies is whenever I do this with my own personal rankings and I'm over, I go back and I kind of pick a number and say, well, if I took like 1,000 off of a handful of them, 1,000 here and 1,000 there might not hurt anybody. So can anybody take a look at some of this? Just where can we take a little bit away from several places? I don't know if 1,000 is a good place to start, but.
Or another thought I had was looking at something like Life Designs, which is on the screen now. You know, we bumped a handful up for various reasons. If I recall, Life Designs was, it didn't matter the exact amount. It's sort of like we'll serve as many clients as possible. And maybe it makes sense to bring that back down to what the group average was.
Okay, that's a good start. Let's take it down from 10,000 to 8,600. Is that okay with everybody?
Or can we just maybe take it down to 8 just to
round it?
8 or 880. 8800.
That's fine.
And no dollars and cents.
And no dollars and cents.
There you go.
14,000.
All right, well, that helps a little bit. 14,000 to go.
I think you could cut a little bit in the Shalom allocation.
Okay, let's
and,
go there.
And we gave, I think we stayed with the 21,755.
Okay.
And my logic on that is that they have a robust fundraising program. They're certainly do a lot of great work, but they do have a robust fundraising program.
Is everybody okay with that to just go back to the
Take it down to 21,000.
21,000?
Yeah.
Okay. 12,000 to go. Thank you, Ron. Anybody else remember some of those places where we kind of thought we could come back to? What about United Ministries? Because we bumped that up quite a bit.
I don't, I'm not sure if this should make a difference or not. New Hope for Families received a round 2 grant from United Way for 35,000.
Mm-hmm.
But I don't want to penalize people for doing well in another round of grant.
Mm-hmm. Good point. So Sue, what are you suggesting?
I didn't really suggest anything, did I?
Talk to me in dollars and cents, okay?
Yeah, just in themes. Given
Yeah, we
other
could go with the average on that
resources
one.
that they have identified, could we take New Hope down to 10?
Anybody have an issue there?
Sorry, what's New Hope at right now? The cursor, yeah, thanks.
16 from 14.
Just wanted to double check what that would mean for them. Sorry, did somebody say and I missed it? 13, so we did, that 16.7 is based on 3 items. 13 was their first priority item. And if we only funded 1 item, it would be 13,000. That's to expand the family service coordinator's hours.
Shall we go there?
Yeah.
Maybe that's the place to start.
That's a good call.
Okay, excellent. 8,000 to go. We're doing good.
How are people feeling about the 3,000 from Middleway right now?
Oh, yeah.
That was one that we had a lot of questions about.
Yeah.
I would, again, for me, it was not a
Trying to find something
habitability issue.
Beverly has her hand up.
Oh, ooh, I had my hand up. Hold on. My hand was up by mistake. I'm sorry.
Oh, that's quite all right. You can jump in anytime.
All right.
Was that one we had discussed doing all or nothing, and we weren't really sure? I mean, I recall it was equipment and parts and labor were separated costs there, but it was all still kind of a bundle of.
Yeah, we had 3 people recommend nothing and 3 people recommend all. So
Yeah,
that's kind of how that came out.
So.
No one wants to pipe up because no one wants to say I recommend taking $3,000 away from this organization.
I know. This is heartbreaking. I mean, we're laughing because it's
hard.
the graveyard humor, you know. This is so hard. It really is.
Again, they had said in their application that if only partial funding was awarded, they would hope to raise the additional funds to complete the project by November 2020. So they are trying to leverage the funds if we only do a partial, but it's hard.
Can we go back and think of another that maybe we could go back to the average as opposed to something that we bumped up? I'd almost kind of like to go there before we start taking away, completely.
What about all options, taking that? Oh, wait, sorry, never mind. What about taking all options down to 4,000?
I mean, yeah, that is closer to the group average.
Yeah, I'm okay.
And we know they could use that, so.
Okay.
Yeah.
And similarly, that was a program where it's kind of serving as many people as the costs will cover.
Again, I want to kind of take a look at the ones where we bumped it up. Boys and Girls Club, can we take that back down to the average?
That would get us a lot of the way there. Well,
maybe we want to take it down just to 15 or something initially, and
okay. Start there, and we can come back to it if we need to.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's fair.
15.
Yeah.
Okay.
Let's see, on Life Designs, we had bumped it up to 10,000 and the average was 88.66. So you get 1,200 there if you want.
We already reduced that, I think.
No, that's
we
pretty
already
close.
did?
Yeah, we did that.
Oh, so sorry.
All right. Look at New Leaf, look at Pantry. Well, Planned Parenthood, we bumped them up to their full ask. You want to take them back down to 10,000?
That might have been a case where everybody fully funded, but one or something.
Yeah.
I recall their itemized request was this one item, this specific amount.
Yeah.
So I'm a little hesitant.
Yeah, no, I agree. I mean, yeah. I'd like to keep them up full.
Let's keep them there.
Stephen, can you scroll up a little? Thank you.
Can everyone check their cushions for $4,794?
In loose change?
See.
Because again, we're at the top of the ladder because we are already involving our cushion.
I'm happy to scroll to whatever agency anybody wants to take a look at. I'm just kind of meandering right now.
Okay, so, well, should we take a look at Habitat again? We
Maybe,
significantly.
Yeah. Yeah. And so that 15,000
to 8,000, what would that cover for them?
Well, 8,000 would give us more money.
But I mean, what can they do for the 8,000 in terms of the
Do a lot of work.
They had a right-of-way tree clearing is 5,000. Tree lot clearing on 2 different lots was also 5,000. The women build site access was 2,250.
So 10,000 will get them at least 2 things.
10,000 will get 2 of the items on the list. Yeah.
Yeah.
Or, yeah.
And
We
that would
okay?
bring you,
Which is still over the average. So that's,
Yeah,
We're $200.
What if-
$200 to go.
no, that's
No.
positive.
we're
So-
up 200.
We're up 200. Oh,
Yeah.
that's right.
So Matt, before
Okay.
we lose it, what were those two items that the $10,000
Well,
covered?
It's
They
the,
could-
it's the first and third items on their priority list. So honestly, they could cover the first two and have a little left over to go to the third. I'm frankly not concerned about how they choose to allocate 1,000.
Yeah.
They had 5 different items on the list.
Yeah.
It was right-of-way tree clearing,
Yeah, right of way
Yeah.
tree clearing is the first item.
and then Duncan lots, the lots on Duncan Street, tree clearing.
Okay, just tree clearing.
Hi, Stephen. This is Doris. So there's one agency that you have some sense on, which is why you have that 0.31. Is it possible to round them up $1 or take off the cents?
Sure, I assume that would make it easier for you all to administer.
Go down the pre-allocation amount. See, that's why you have 0.31 left over.
Yes. There are probably a few.
Get
Like
rid of
that.
all the cents. If there's
Okay.
cents anywhere, get rid of the cents.
Okay.
There we go. We're at a solid 205.
205. Yeah.
And I'm okay with leaving that amount as a cushion. I don't know that that's going to help anybody significantly.
And that includes the 8,000, right?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah.
That seems like a good place to be.
Yeah.
Yeah.
That's pretty good.
Okay. Shall we go over the entire list just one more time from the top to the bottom to make sure that there's nothing else we want to do?
Why don't we go from the bottom to the top?
There you go. We can.
As someone whose last name is toward the end of the alphabet.
And this would be a good time again to, if it's important to the committee that they spend this money on any particular part of their application, now would be a good time to specify that. If we don't specify, I'm going to assume that it's fine for them to use the money on anything that was included in their application and draft the funding agreements to reflect that.
And you know, something that we might say is that we're okay with that in general, but these are just kind of rationales as to why we allocated the dollar amount we did so that they could at least get some of their prioritized items. But and I don't like to micromanage these agencies. They know more what they need than we do. So
I know in past years, I'm guessing that the committee has not wanted to fund specific things. So if there aren't any of those concerns this year, then it may not matter as much. But yeah.
This helps. This Dan here.
Hi, Dan.
Hi. We do send these funding agreements to the agencies, and there's a bit of discussion with them about how they want to spend the money. So that's where will know a little bit more about any change in priorities. So we'll carry your preferences to the agencies and draft a funding agreement accordingly.
But Dan, you would be okay if we don't provide maybe guidance as detailed as we've done in past years?
It works. We'll ask them what they want and with partial funding, and it may narrow their list some. If it doesn't, we go with the list in their proposed allocation. So.
Okay, thank you.
All
All
right.
right,
Add on to Dan, I'm sorry, Susan.
Doris.
To Dan's statement, it's a lot easier for us to be able to administer those funding agreements if we have an idea of what the council and the committee's recommendations are of the activity that they wanted to fund.
Okay.
As Dan know, over this past year, we've had to come back to the chair, and I think once even to you, Susan, to say an agency has switched gears and say, well, I know you provided me funding for X, but now I want to spend it on Y. And so it's like we usually have to come back to the committee and say, are you comfortable with spending it, on Y when you really allocate it for X? So the most you know, if the more specific you can be in helping us to understand how the committee wants to allocate the dollars is most helpful to us.
Okay, thank you.
Is there a way, it's just a matter of default setting to say that if we don't specify which item, that then it is then restricted to the items listed? So if we just talked about Habitat, for instance, which had 5 different items listed, and I could imagine them choosing to not do it in the exact priority order, or the 10,000 we decided to give them would allow them to do 1 and 3. That's our thinking. Maybe they think 1 and 2 are more important, and they don't want to use all the funds. So I guess unless we have a strong preference for specifying the project, Pantry 279 was another, that if we can just sort of say it's restricted to what was on the application, if that's not already clear.
I like that a lot because they've already given us their priorities.
Right.
As long as they're in that range, I don't see that they need to come back to us and ask permission.
Is there a way, what are your, Stephen or Dan or Doris, perhaps, as far as administration, can we just say as a default setting, like it has to match one of the itemized things on your application?
Absent any instruction from you, that is the list. Sometimes, not to complicate matters, they say, hey, we want to do something else. Maybe they have money left over. And we try to say, is it similar to what was granted, what you were awarded in the grant? So the list is essentially, Matt, the default.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Okay, well, with that in mind, we'll try to be as specific as we can as we go back up through that, all right? How's that? Okay, so starting at the bottom with Wheeler.
Stephen, can you scroll left, please?
So we can see
sorry.
the name of the agency. Yes. Yeah, there we go.
Thank you.
All right, this is basically personnel, right?
Yes.
So do we need to put a note there, just personnel in general, or is that sufficient?
That's good.
Okay, up to St. Vincent. We gave them the full ask. Help people with their rent.
Rent assistance.
Rent, yeah.
If it's the full ask, I don't think you guys need to specify.
No.
It's already, yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
South Central, full ask. We don't need a note. Shalom. Does that still cover the floor and the exterior painting since we reduced it a bit?
Pretty close.
Okay. Planned Parenthood, full ask for their equipment. Is that right? We don't need a note. For the pantry, we had a rich discussion about $20,000 buys them their truck, but we did not have a problem if they wanted to put that toward the executive director's salary. So truck or executive director's salary.
Looking good.
New Leaf. What does this partial do for them? We already, yeah.
It's in there.
We already got that. New Hope, we are not going to fund them. The joint project, we're not going to fund. Family Stability, coordinator's hour. Got that. Mother Hubbard's cupboard is full. Macum, computers is what we have already tagged. Casa, security system. Middleway House. Are we?
We only asked for one thing.
So it's kind of on them as to how they can proceed with just the partial, right? Meals on Wheels is full. Made Up Mind is withdrawn. Life Designs. Do we need to do any stipulating there?
No, I don't think so.
Okay. Hoosier Hills full. Health Net full. Habitat. Tree clearing. El Centro rent assistance.
Can we go back to Habitat for a minute?
Sure.
It was tree clearing in the right of way and on Duncan Street, not just in the right of way. So I don't know, just a
Yeah.
We can just say tree clearing and leave it at that.
Just a small point. Again, the second item on their list is women build site access from West Guy, which isn't technically tree clearing. And if that's a higher priority to them than the West Duncan lot tree clearing, I'd want them to be free to pursue that, I guess.
And this may be a case where it's better to leave it up to them as long as it's something that has been included on their application.
I would agree with that. Yeah.
All right. Yep.
All right. Full ask for El Centro, again, rent assistance, courage to change, full ask. Community kitchen, full ask. Centerstone, we said nothing. Catholic Charities. Do we need to specify there, or are we? That's pretty close to their full ask. Boys and Girls Club. We need to do any clarification there.
I don't think so.
And cooperative living, we did, what did we do there?
0.
0, yeah. Big Brothers, 0. And Amethyst House, and all options. Ladies and gentlemen, is our work here completed for the evening?
It looks like it.
Before the committee adjourns, if this is what the committee is comfortable with, I think we'd want a motion to authorize staff to prepare a funding recommendation sheet that will look just like this, consistent with the discussions and the notes I've taken. That's what you all will forward to the meeting next Tuesday, May 26th at 6 p.m. You'll make the announcements of the awards at that meeting, and that'll be another public meeting. Typically, that's the only meeting that's broadcast on CATS, but since we've moved all of our meetings to these virtual settings, we've had the benefit of making all of them more accessible to the public. So, if the committee is comfortable with these recommendations, a motion to authorize staff to prepare them and to forward those to the meetings next week is in order.
So moved.
Second.
Moved and seconded. Do we need to vote individually, or can we say all in favor, say aye?
If people just want to go one at a time and say yes, I think that's fine.
Okay. Yes. Tim?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
All right. It is unanimous.
And
Forward.
one other item of information. Beverly's. I think.
Thank you, Beverly.
Thanks, Beverly.
I'll also want a motion from the committee to, well, I don't know that I need to do this tonight.
About the additional, requesting the additional from the administrator. Yeah, okay.
Yeah, I don't think there's any harm in doing this tonight. If the committee wants to move to request the administration to propose an appropriation ordinance in the amount of, give me just a second, I think it's $7,795.
So moved.
Second.
All right. I vote yes. Tim?
Yes.
Mark?
Yes.
Ron?
Yes.
Sue?
Yes.
Matt?
Yes.
All right. That is unanimous, and that moves forward.
And the last note is just another reminder that the meeting next week is where the awards will be announced. That is typically the only meeting in this process until the full council meeting, where the council will consider the resolution, where public comment is invited. Once we go through and list the allocation amounts, the public typically has a chance to speak and address the committee at that time. So.
Right. In past years, this has been very pro forma. It takes just a few minutes to go through the list and say, this is what the Jack Hopkins Committee is recommending in the amounts and what it's for. Usually the chair does that, names it all down. And then at the end of that, we do open up for public comment. Now, very rarely is there anybody ever in chambers for this. But I will tell you, we've got a couple of hot button organizations on here. There may be people that may come and may want to speak. So be prepared for that. Again, we're in a new Zoom platform, so this may spark a little more attention than it normally does. But this is our opportunity, and maybe to each individual member of the council, or the committee rather, if you want to say a few words on behalf of this year's process, we usually open that up for you as well. But the next meeting will be very quick, and I think the next time we get together as a group is a debriefing meeting that will not happen until June. June 11 is what we currently have it. And those are good because we have a lot of newcomers on this committee this year, and it's helpful to kind of think about, how did this process go? What did we like? What could we do better? This is our first time doing this in Zoom. I think it was relatively painless. I think you all have done remarkable work, and this went fairly quickly.
You did great, Susan.
Yeah, thank you, Susan.
Yeah.
Thank you. But
Thanks.
debriefing helps us then prepare for the next year. And hopefully we'll be back to being in person rather than being virtual, but we shall see. Anything else, Stephen?
No, thank you all for coming so prepared. You guys made it much easier to go through all of this, so I appreciate that. And
Beautiful.
Thanks for all your help too, Stephen. It
Yeah,
Oh,
made it
my.
a lot
Yes.
easier than it could have been.
And
Thank you,
Becky,
Stephen.
Sophia, too.
Very much.
yep, thank you, Becky. She did a lot of the leg.
Woo-hoo.
Yeah.
Yep. And
And I also want to thank Doris, and I also want to say welcome to Cody. Your work is ahead. Our heavy lifting is pretty much over at this point. So
Thanks, Doris.
You're welcome. It's always a pleasure every year. of
Yes,
working.
absolutely.
It is. And Beverly is still with us. And again, thanks to the guidance from the work group, because this is a very critical year, and this work is probably more important than it's ever been. So thank you, one and all. I think this should conclude our business for tonight.